Good afternoon. Welcome to the Schulich School of Law of Dalhousie University. Dalhousie University would like to acknowledge that the university is on traditional Mi'kmaq territory. My name is Archie Kaiser. I'm a professor here and the faculty advisor for our pro bono students program. We are delighted to have the opportunity to hear from Derek Twyman. His remarkable story, survival from a 160-year judicially imposed sentence in a North Carolina prison for nonviolent property offenses, and his release after nearly 30 years of incarceration, has instructive and inspirational elements for all of us in this varied audience. In our courts, an expert can give expert opinion evidence because of their knowledge, their training, and their experience. Derek's expertise has been acquired at a very high price, but in this environment, this law school environment, where more conventional professional perspectives are inculcated, we do not hear enough from people who have endured the range of restrictions and sanctions that elements of the justice system impose. Derek's saga has given him extraordinary insights into the criminal justice system in general, and more particularly, sentencing considerations and options, living in the unique environment of a prison, barriers to rehabilitation, release, and community integration, and in general, the challenges of staying grounded as a human being when the world is acting as if it has first loathed you and then forgotten you. Derek's case helps us to reflect on other discarded people who either should not be in institutions or who are kept there for too long. Persons with intellectual disabilities, persons with mental illness, persons with other disabilities, the elderly, youth detainees, and many others, particularly those who face intersectional discrimination. So thank you so much, Derek, for joining us today. Many have contributed to the remarkable process which has led to this event. Shane Martinez, the lawyer who has taken a continuous interest in Derek's case since 2007. Our many Dal pro bono students who have assisted along the way. Ryan Bernard, Juliana Pide, Stephanie Morton, Tyler McLean, Ashley Hill, who is here today, and Rebecca Hovey. We are also delighted to have Mark Knox here with us today. Mark is a local lawyer who has been very active in supporting marginalized populations, including through his roles as a co-founder of Seventh Step Nova Scotia, which helps chronic offenders reintegrate, and his presidency of the Canadian Prison Law Association. Mark is going to introduce Derek and explain how their fates became linked. Then Derek is going to tell us his story, and he'll also take questions at the end. Within the law school, I wish to thank the Dean for providing the snacks and the refreshments at the back of the room and for endorsing this event. Elizabeth Sanford, Jane Doucette, and Lindsay Loomer for their generous assistance in putting it all together. So welcome all. We will first hear from Mark before we turn the lectern over to Derek. Thank you so much for coming.
Okay, thank you very much, Archie. As Archie said, I'm a member of the Seven Step Society of Canada. And in June of 2016, I came back to the office one day and had one of these pink slips. And it said, Mark so-and-so called at, 2:30. And it was a Derek Twyman call from North Carolina. And he's been in jail for 28 years, and he'd like to talk to you, right? And the Seven Step Society had helped another Canadian be repatriated to Canada out west, so we had had some experience with that before. And I talked to Derek somehow a few days later and learned what Sheila's been part of this project to get Derek here. Learned what everybody who learned about it, felt very quickly, and that was that if you do a property crime and there's no guns, there's no violence, there's no drugs, nobody's hurt, nobody's home, and you're young and you wind up with this sentence, you appreciate that it's so wrong by today's standards, and it's very engaging. It kind of catches you, it puts a hook in you really quick. So that was a hook, and many people, Sheila, Adelina, Bob Lutz, QC from the Valley, Robert T. Smith, retired provincial court judge from Newfoundland, Labrador, Hugh Kierkegaard, who's sitting in the front row, the only person so far who's not. Are you a Dow grad? No, I didn't think you were. You should be. But so many Dow grads were part of what happened. And I'll just roll the ball forward a little bit. So pro bono Dow was helping 7-Step, as Archie said. And when the new term came along to look at the projects, it was Tyler. This was a couple years ago. Tyler said, how did it go last year? Do you want to do it again? Yes, yes. And I just took a leap and I said, Tyler, can we get somebody to do this new thing? Because Derek had come along and I said, maybe we can call it the International Transfer Project, and let's try to get this guy repatriated under the International Transfer of Offenders Act. That was the goal, get him back to Canada, because he's Canadian, he'll tell you. And let him serve a sentence here, let him be released here, let him get out on parole here, let him adjust here, let him come back to the community, and so on and so forth. So that was the goal. And as Archie said, students wrote letters, Senator Kim Pate wrote letters, Robert T. Smith wrote letters, we all wrote letters, hoping that Derek would come back under the treaty. Then May of 2017 arrives. Derek, as Archie said, had Shane Martinez helping him immensely in Ontario. And he had a pro bono lawyer helping him in North Carolina, Derek did. A guy named James T. Craven? James?
P. Craven.
P?
B as in Bravo.
James B. Craven III. And James B. Craven III called one day and he said, I just got finished speaking to the parole commissioners in North Carolina, and they seem to think now that enough is enough. Great quote, and I'll never forget it. So what he was saying is they felt like they were finished with Derek. They could let him go instead of serving the rest of the 160-year sentence. And the big impediment for the transfer was the judge who sentenced him gave him this restitution order of over $300,000. And the transfer law in North Carolina was nobody gets transferred without paying that. And that was a big anchor for many years. But something happened and they decided they wanted to get him away, get him out, get him gone, and not use the treaty. So instead of coming back to Canada with, I hate to say it, but kind of a cushion and a net to capture somebody and to reintegrate them, albeit under supervision, it was now they're just going to release him, and the U.S. immigration people will pick him up because he's a foreign alien and take him to the Canadian border and say, here. And you'd think that was a real relief, but as Ashley remembers, and Hugh, it was a super anxious new chapter, because a guy who comes from Canada but at a young age goes to North Carolina and is going to be released from prison 30 years later and has nobody in Canada. And we didn't know anything about skills, we didn't know anything about remote family members, we didn't know anything about Derek, except we talked to him on the phone. So this seemed to be an even more ominous thing to happen. So that was very worrisome. in July, I met with Ashley for the first time, and she's going over, how's the 7-step project? Pretty good. Want to do it again? Yeah. And then it's what about the international transfer project? And I said, well, that's over. The guy's coming home. She said, well, what do you mean? So I started telling her about it, and we found out that Ashley is previously a social worker. I almost said retired. Previously a social worker in Toronto. So Ashley, same thing with Hugh, Ashley has this experience in Toronto with things that Derek would need. And so that was a real illuminating light, and Ashley grabbed it, and Derek can tell you a little bit about how that played out. What else do we got here? So Derek arrives in Toronto November 1st, and Shane picks him up at the airport. Shane Martinez, this guy who was a law student in New Brunswick, and just happened to come across Derek's story, and made this connection with Derek, and has been a supporter of Derek for 10 years. Shane picks him up. Shane's going to house him, but Ashley's friend in Toronto instead takes Derek in, which is, to me, the most remarkable thing in the world. None of us sitting in this room would do it. Take somebody that you don't know who's been in prison for 30 years. Sure, come stay with me. But that's what happened here. So since then, we've stayed in touch with Derek. Since then, Derek's been working on employment, working about more permanent housing. And he's been helping 7-Step develop a 7-Step group in Toronto. And he has the energy, he has the excitement, he has the positivity to make that a really, really good group. So we're blessed up there to have Derek. And why are you here? I think Derek just decided he was going to come here for a week. I guess he needed a holiday or something. So he came here, and he thought he'd be here just to look around, and our 7-Step group decided we'd put him to work. So Monday night we took him to our Valley group, where he's been Skyping in to our meetings up there for probably a couple months. Tuesday, he went to St. Mary's to speak to Jamie Livingston's class, or maybe some students here from his class, I'm not sure. Tuesday night, I think that was last night, he came to our street group meeting. There's a fair amount of people here from that last night. You're here this evening, right? Yeah. This afternoon, whatever it is. And then tomorrow morning,
Can't forget CBC News.
Oh yeah, CBC got a hook into him today, did an interview. And tomorrow morning, with our 7-Step group, we're taking him to St. Agnes Junior High School with another person with conviction to talk to the junior high school there. So that's what I have to say about Derek Twyman, so I'll sit down and let you speak, okay?
Okay.
All right, sure.
I guess I should start with a little background information and tell you that I guess the vacation is out the door. So he'll have something else lined up for me before the week's out. But the American accent I got that in prison. I was actually born in Oakville. At the age of 14, 15, I moved with my family to North Carolina, a place called Winston-Salem. I don't know if you're familiar with it. But my father was actually the furniture buyer for all the Sears stores in Canada. And he would go to North Carolina 2 or 3 times a year to go to the furniture markets. And at the furniture markets, he would buy the furniture for here, and he happened to see a store that was for sale. My brother, he was playing football at Wake Forest University in Winston-Salem. So he packed everybody up and we moved down there. When you get into a new town, I guess at the age of 15, you're trying to fit in everywhere or anywhere you can. I ended up running with the wrong people, made some bad decisions. Participated in about 4 break-and enterings. The guy that actually did the break-and enterings to start with, he ended up with 20, maybe 30 charges. But when he got arrested, he actually got arrested prior to me getting arrested. He told the police that he had done them, but I was the ringleader. I was the one that did them all. I made him do them all. So the argument was with my attorneys at the time, you know, I didn't do any of this stuff, and the police are saying this guy's an eyewitness to a crime. Even though he's saying he did the crimes, he's still an eyewitness. So I got arrested. I spent maybe 8-9 months in jail waiting for trial. The whole time during my stay, I think they had me under a $380,000 cash-only bond because they knew I was actually from Toronto, and they seemed to be scared that I might leave the country if I got out on bond. But my attorney at the time, he was going back and forth with the DAs, calling the Department of Corrections. He had, what I thought had set up, because I have a letter saying so, he had set up a plea agreement. It was 2 14-year sentences, suspended 10-year sentence, if I decided to plead guilty in front of this fair judge that was friends of the victims and knows them personally. But if I waited another week, the worst judge in the district's coming. He's going to load you up. He might give you 1,000 years. So I ended up pleading guilty to the charge. Went to court in front of this fair judge that knew the victims. The judge sentenced me to 120 years, 3 40-year sentences. 4 hours later, he brought me back into court, and he said I didn't show remorse in his courtroom 4 hours early. I'm going to sentence you to 40 more years. And then with the restitution orders, it's by law, it's supposed to be actual loss to the victims, whatever the victims had to pay or lost. This man decided it was $308,000 restitution. Not sure where he got the figures from, but he threw that on the end too. So when I got incarcerated, it's kind of like the Wild West 30 years ago in prison in North Carolina. I got a deportation detainer when I got there because they ask you in processing, where are you from? So I told them Canada. I'm originally from Toronto. So they put this deportation hold on me. They actually call it a federal crime. So being incarcerated, any promotions that you may get from your custody levels, you got like close custody, medium custody, minimum custody. Minimum custody being you can go out to volunteer passes, to AA groups, go to church, possibly work. But with the deportation detainer, you can't get any of them. You can't get any kind of passes. You can't go out. You're stuck basically in this medium custody. You can't even make parole, because if you come up for parole, they're going to tell you you have an immigration hold. You're not even from this country, so we can't parole you to Canada or any other country. So you're denied. So I got into prison looking at different things. You have a lot of free time, so I start picking up books and reading them. Eventually I looked at psychology. I was looking at, because I'd seen a lot of inmates in the prison, and some of them you just look at and wonder, what the hell are you doing? You know, why did you do this? So I had to get these psychology books out and read behavior, try to figure out, you know, why is this guy doing this? But I studied that for about 4 years. And then about the 5th year I was incarcerated, they changed the law. The sentencing judge, he's the one that changed the law. He changed the law to 9 to 12 months for the same crime that I was sentenced to 160 years for. So they came out with this thing called structured sentencing. I was under the misnamed law of the Fair Sentencing Act, which didn't seem fair to me. But I got in there, and so I started studying law, looking at different cases. Cruel unusual punishment is what I looked at because of the law change, the length of the sentence. So I started studying different laws, and ended up about 10 years went by. While I'm in there, I'm looking for things to do, or looking for this word they keep saying is rehabilitation. I'm trying to find these classes. You know, where's the rehabilitation classes? There's no such thing as rehabilitation in the prison system. I think that's a word outside of prison, because they don't have anything in place where I was. They may have it here in Canada, they may have it somewhere else. The only thing they had was AA group and NA group. The reason you would go to these AA groups or NA groups, The AA group I went to, there was a caseworker that owned a Domino's pizza. So every Tuesday night he would bring Domino's pizzas. So we had a way to go eat some Domino's pizzas, which we wouldn't normally get, drink some coffee and talk for an hour. So the rehabilitation, I guess I'm still looking for it. I think my opinion of rehabilitation is you've got to change, kind of like the 7-step group. You have to decide, I don't want this life. I want to do better for myself, so you start studying and doing different things. During my years of incarceration, I taught GED. I was a teacher's aide for ESL class, trained dogs, worked in an optical plant, took 2 years of graphic design, any number of things. I did a whole lot of stuff. Just things to keep busy to better myself. So that's what I would consider rehabilitation. I've seen guys a lot of times come back and forth to prison 4 or 5 different times. But then I also had these letters printed up. I don't know if did you get one of those letters? I had a pre-printed letters that I would send to the media. I had pre-printed letters that I would send to attorneys. I had pre-printed letters I'd send to the senators. I wrote every senator in North Carolina probably 5 or 6 different times. There's 168 of them, I still remember. 168 letters. Every February I'd write and say, this deportation law you've got, which was actually from the Patriot Act, it said if you committed a crime and you're from another country, you're to be deported. North Carolina decided to put on it this clause. The clause said that you must pay your restitution or court costs prior to be even considered for deportation. So my argument was, if you have foreign inmates coming to prison and you're giving them trades and electrical wiring, brick masonry, carpentry, and your court cost in your state is $210, why would I pay $210 to go to a third world country where I'm not getting anything for free? You're giving me this education. So that was one of the letters that I'd sent to these senators every year. But right here at the end, probably 2015, right, or 16, when the News and Observer article came out, 2016, the Raleigh News and Observer came. They had gotten one of the letters and was looking, and they were concerned about the time I got and how much it ended up costing the state of North Carolina $1 million to house me for the 28 years before he showed up. So they did an interview. One of the people that was in prison with me, a man named Michael Peterson, I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's an author out of North Carolina. He was on appeal at the time and read the article that was in the paper and contacted James Craven. And James Craven, the attorney in Durham, contacted me and said, look, send me all your court papers. Michael Peterson contacted me and said to help you out. At the time, I was writing to Shane Martinez. I think he was working a case in Jamaica, but I had met up with him when he was a law student probably 10, 15 years ago, 12 years ago. So we contacted back and forth. Any motions that I filed, I would send to him. He'd look at them, approve them, or whatever. Because I was also studying law, I picked up a whole bunch of law books. One y'all might know, the Georgetown Law Journal. Y'all familiar with that? It's about this thick. Are you familiar with it?
No.
It's about that thick, and it covers any argument you want, any case that comes out every year from Georgetown University. But you could buy that book for about 10 years, and you could research the cases, then you could get online. Actually had officers and staff members who would get on a website called justia.com. And I could give them case law, and they'd print them out for me under the table and say, here you go. Because even the staff knew that it was a crazy sentence. Because they were there every day working. They would see this guy with a sex crime got 3 years. A month later, he got out, he's back. It didn't make sense to me either. So a lot of the staff would probably help me along and give me different things. But eventually, James Craven, he went to the parole commission. I think Mark explained everything that he was doing with the Dalhousie and everything here, but James Craven ended up going to the parole commission. He knew the judge that sentenced me. He knew the governor's attorney. Somehow the judge even claimed, which you might see on some of the TV shows, that he assisted me in my release, but he didn't have anything to do with it. Trust me on that. The only thing he helped me do was get in prison. I think he told somebody one time that he thought I'd already gotten released, but that's probably a lie too. But ended up that James Craven went to the parole commission, like he said. They said that enough was enough, and they ended up paroling me to ICE because, like I said earlier, they couldn't parole me to another country. So they paroled me to ICE, which is Immigration Customs Enforcement, and I'm actually still paroled to ICE on paper. So I think that's about the end of the story. If anybody's got any questions, happy to answer. Yes, sir.
The prison you were in, was that state-run or was that a private contractor?
I went to 20 different prisons. 2 of the prisons were privately owned. Yeah. I even had a superintendent one time. He was a new superintendent. He was in the hallway of the prison talking to inmates who were coming out in the kitchen. And he was shaking everybody's hand. Hey, nice to see you. How you doing? And he asked me, he said, where are you from? I said, Canada. And he asked me, he said, how do you like North Carolina? I said, I hate it. They don't even let me go out and look at nothing. You know what I mean? From what I've seen, I don't like it. But there was 2 privately owned. CCA owned them, Correction Corp of America. Some of the state prisons compared to the CCA prisons, well, with budget cuts being so bad in North Carolina, the state prisons a lot of times are run worse than the CCA prisons. Because depending on what your needs are, the state prisons really don't provide a good medical service. With the CCA prisons, they have like a policies in place which they have to do certain things by law because it's a private or publicly owned company. With the state, they cover up so much stuff. I've seen people die. They've told people that they've got heartburn. Man, the next day he turned yellow because he had liver disease and died like a month later because they were giving him antacid tablets. They had another man die one time from TB, tuberculosis. He had tested 5 years earlier as a carrier, and they told him they were going to give him a chest x-ray every year. They never gave him a chest x-ray. 5 years later, he couldn't breathe, could hardly walk. Ended up taking him to the hospital, and he ended up dying there. When I asked the staff members about it, their answer is, a lot of times, well, he didn't die here. Reason is they don't have to put it down as him dying at the prison. They always shoot him to the hospital just before somebody dies, so they got a clean record on it. So a lot of times one person, prison's just as bad as the other. Not necessarily CCA being any better than the state, but everyone's run different. Every prison that I've been to, all 20 have been totally different. Yes?
Was the judge who sentenced you, was he an elected judge or an appointed judge?
Judges are elected, same with the district attorneys. It was funny, I was telling Mark the other day that he was actually supposed to recuse himself because he knew the people personally. But when one of the victims was Mike Reynolds from a big company in North Carolina, J. Reynolds Tobacco Company. When Tom Ross retired from being a judge, somehow he got the position as the president in the Reynolds Foundation. So it was kind of questionable to me how he ended up jumping from one spot to that spot. I did appeal the sentence. That's what I was saying. I had studied law because I had given lawyers thousands of dollars. The last one I paid was $4,850 he wanted to read my court papers. My court papers were 98 pages long. He came back and said he wanted $30,000 to write an appeal. So what I did after that was, I didn't figure anybody would try as hard as me to get out. So I started getting law books, reading them on everything. Whenever I had free time or had a stamp to write somebody, get some information on case law, I did that. So I used, a lot of times I would use appeals on the Georgetown Law Journal that I'd ordered as my templates. I put my basic information at the beginning, my argument was cruel and unusual punishment, and they turned me down for the appeals. They said your sentence was correct and just when you got sentenced, and that was the end of that.
So there's no support from the government
They had an organization called North Carolina Prisoners Legal Service. My first run-in with them was I had asked them to send me a copy of this case law. They sent me a letter back, said they didn't provide photocopies. But it was actually set up to help inmates, but I haven't seen them help anybody. The only time they've ever come in and helped somebody is when someone's at the door about to win a civil lawsuit. They'll come in and say, oh, we'll help you, just so they can put their name on it and say they won the case. But no, there's nothing in place anywhere. You can't even hardly get information on where to begin. It's like a constant struggle to try to get out. Yes, sir.
Have you ever thought that by bringing up all this information to the prisons, it might hurt you in the future?
I don't think so. I'm never going back to America. I'll tell you something else. I'll tell you somebody else that's completely useless is the Canadian Consulate. If any of y'all ever get arrested in any country, they are not going to help you. They told me they didn't interfere with foreign countries' laws after I told them I had 160 years. So that was the end of that. I think you may have talked to them once or twice down there. And they're useless. They didn't even know I was still in prison one time. I called them from immigration jail and said, look, when am I leaving you? Well, I thought you were gone last week. I said, I don't even know when I'm gone. Y'all be careful with them if you ever run into them. Yes, sir.
Was your case out of line with other cases in jail and you, was your sentence typical of the area?
No. Hell no. I was probably I think an attorney here in Canada told me one time I had the most amount of time of any Canadian in the world.
Was a warden there for a long time?
Was what?
Was a warden there for a long time?
A warden?
A warden in your jail. Was he in position for quite a few years, or did they turn over all the time?
They turned over a lot. They'd get different promotions and move on, or I was in 20 different prisons. What they called them was administrators now, or superintendents. The only place that had a warden was what they call Central Prison in Raleigh, which was like a processing prison that held about 1,000 people.
Anyone who ever asked the question to a superior?
Did what now?
Did any one of those wardens or superintendents ever say, what's this guy doing here?
They would never ask, but I've asked 3 or 4 of them before, and they'd tell you, look, I'm trying to get promotions. It's none of my business, you know what I mean? They're going to ask me, why are you worried about that? Your job's running this prison here. You're not in Raleigh worried about why these people got sentenced to what they did. I've had them tell me that. Yes?
I think you said that you first met Martinez when he was a student.
Right.
Can you tell how that happened?
Yeah, there was these Penpal sites they had for prisoners, like writeaprisoner.com, but instead of running Penpal ads, I'd post information about my case and photocopies of different things. Well, he ran across that case when he was a law student, maybe 10, 12 years ago, and he contacted me, and we went back and forth for a long time. Actually, he's still doing it today. I still run the court for him in Toronto sometimes when he needs some help.
Can I ask you a second question?
Sure.
So the international transfer of offenders thing, the act, when did you first apply for that? Because I know Mark was working on that stuff, but did you apply for it before, or was that the first time when Mark?
I've actually applied for it about 3 different times.
Yeah.
But what the problem you run into is when you're doing what they call pro se, you're dead. You're already dead. It's when you file something yourself and it goes to court or any place and they don't see an attorney's name on it, a lot of times it's going to be turned down immediately. We had this thing where we used to call what they would call jailhouse lawyers speak. It was called delay and deny. Anytime you put in a motion, they would delay it as long as they could until you wrote them. Say, hey, what's going on with my motion? What happened? And then they deny it. A week later, you get a denial. So they try to burn up a lot of time because a lot of these things had 2-year wait periods. If you didn't do it within 2 years, it was over. So they delay as long as they could. Try to get these time frames burned up. Yes?
What are the biggest challenges of
Being released? I think the prices. I think when I got locked up, a loaf of bread was 79 cents. Now it's, I think I paid almost $3 for a loaf one time at Loblaws in Toronto.
They did a voucher now.
Yeah.
Well, that leads to my second question, but I want to know how you kept your sense of humor.
Well, I try to keep a positive attitude when I study psychology and those sort of things. They've got a lot of different self-help books I also read about affirmations, and you've got to tell yourself it's going to be a good day whether it's not. If you tell yourself it's going to be a bad day, then most of the time that's what you get.
Did you have any experience with meditation or mindfulness throughout your day?
Yes. I believe I studied a little bit of everything while I was incarcerated 30 years. Yeah.
Did you find that helpful at all?
A little bit, not so much though, no. I think some people can handle it a little bit. It's just kind of hard to meditate with your eyes closed and you're sitting in the middle of a floor in a prison and you don't know what's going on. It's not really the place to meditate. Yes?
You talked about reading a lot and studying a lot, so that means you had access to books through a prison library? Or?
Well, the prison libraries a lot of times relied on donations from other inmates. A lot of times I would get my family to order books from Amazon. Or
I wondered whether there was a prison budget for the library or whether it was...
There's a budget, but a lot of times they order stuff that they want more than stuff for the inmates. I think
they
actually...
were dependent on private individuals.
No, they had a budget maybe $200 a year. Yeah, that's a small amount of a budget. Yeah, it wasn't much. Yes?
Do you know what kind of the next move for you from here?
Well, I'm hoping to maybe attend paralegal school in Toronto. I think that'd be a good field. But I've been trying to just figure it out myself, apparently. I started out, was thinking about an apartment. And apartments, everyone in Toronto, I don't know about here, but everyone in Toronto you got to go look at. Because the pictures, I don't know who's designing those pictures. But there's nothing like it when you get there. So, but Toronto's so big, you're spending whole days just looking at stuff on the internet, and then you go 2 hours this way to Scarborough, and then an hour this way. And then when you get there, they're going to ask you, well, we need to do a credit check. We need your bank account number. Where did you at before this? Now you're like, well, I ain't got none. So if you've got 10 applications and one's no credit, the next one's perfect credit, there you go. So I went from looking at places to now I'm looking at jobs. I figured, okay, let me get a job, then I'll have credit, and maybe I can get a place there. Yes?
Well, Derek, I'm very interested in the mental health of prisoners, and so I'm wondering, given that you seem to survive miraculously, I think, what did you observe about your fellow prisoners in terms of their mental health voyages, and particularly those prisoners who maybe had pre-existing vulnerabilities but who were also put in segregation? What did you see in the world around you?
Okay. With the mental health inmates, it was, when I first got incarcerated, it was rare to see mental health patients or people like that, because they had a place called Dorothea Dix in Raleigh. A lot of times if you committed a crime, they would call it guilty but insane, and they would send you to Dorothea Dix. But Dorothea Dix ended up shutting down, so we ended up getting a runoff from the mental health facilities. So you're running into a lot of people now, maybe 10% or maybe 15% of the prison population is now on. It may be higher probably, but we had a lot of mental health patients coming in. Well, the staff's not prepared to handle them, so their first action is place them in segregation. So you've got some guys sometimes that are hard to control, and they're just throwing in segregation. I've seen guys incarcerated in segregation for 10 years. Segregation is maybe a 5-foot by 10-foot square room with a toilet, a bed in it, and you're not coming out of it. Medication's coming around, nurses coming to see you. Unless you just have to go somewhere, like to visit, they may let you out of there for an hour. 3 times a week you go to the yard for an hour, but then you're locked inside a small dog cage, so you can't get to other inmates. It's probably not much bigger than this area here. That's where you exercise at for an hour. But with the mental health patients, they've actually, just before I got out, they were coming up with new plans for mental health patients. They had like a room set up. It was like a cool down room, they were calling it. It was painted up real nice for them, made it look pretty. They even changed the name of segregation. It's called restricted housing now. It's the same place, just got a nice name. But other than that, it is an issue there with the segregation and the mental health inmates. There was actually an inmate, I don't know his name. He was a disabled American veteran, and he was off his medication. I think he may have been bipolar, but they put handcuffs on him to come out, and he wouldn't give the handcuffs back. But there's a trap door on the doors, and you're supposed to put your hands behind your back and lean over, and they put handcuffs on you. Well, I guess he didn't feel like doing it that day, so they shoved him back in the room and left the handcuffs on him. 3 days later, he died of dehydration because nobody came back to get the handcuffs off him. He couldn't drink water. They drove him to the prisons, the alleged prison's hospital, Central Prison, which was like 4 hours away. They passed 4 hospitals on the way. And like I was saying earlier, when they got him to Central Prison, he was dead, so he didn't die at the prison he left from. They said he was alive when he left there, allegedly. But it was a big deal. It's all over the news. You may be able to check it out. They ended up firing some of the top staff there and the sergeant. And then the sergeants and staff 6 months later appealed that decision. And now they're still working for the DOC. They just got different jobs at different places. Yes?
What advice would you give to someone who's getting out of the system and trying to better their life and just to be able to present to a classroom like this and help others?
Number one thing is get help. 7 Step Society is probably the biggest help. You got a lot of people that sometimes it's like the default in your computer. Your default, if you were raised committing crimes or used to committing crimes, your default is falling back on what you know. So it's easy to get caught back up into what you were doing, but with the right help or the right education, if you say, okay, I'd like to try this out. You may not be good at it, but you might be good at it. Let me go try electrical wiring and take this class. I know the government a lot of times, they've got this OSAP thing where they'll pay you to go to school. But for that advice, that'd be the best thing that I would know. Either 7 Step or maybe going to school and get a different education. Give you a different perspective on something other than your default mode of crime. Yes?
I was just wondering about why you were transferred so many times and whether you've ever tried to challenge the decision to transfer you to another prison.
The transfer, they had one policy in place. You couldn't be at a prison for over 6 years. But when you transferred to a new place, you had the option of putting in a transfer every 6 months. But then sometimes they might feel you're getting too familiar with staff, or they might have heard your name too many times up front, or it's just because they want to move you. There's no real reason why they're moving you. Unless you're a troublemaker, and a lot of times, if you write a lot of what they call grievances, about the prison you're in, like, I don't like this, or I don't like this, or that. If you write 5 grievances within 1 year at a prison you're at, you're going to get shipped. They're going to send you another one because you're going to be banded as a problem at that prison, and they're just trying to get rid of you because there's nothing else they can do with you. But I never did challenge. I've seen some people try to challenge the transfers, and either they were handcuffed and tied and carried on the transfer bus, or went to segregation, got beat up, and shipped the next day. It's not something that you would. There's no option to challenge your transfer. Yes?
Was there any violence with the population?
Yeah, there's plenty of violence. There's a whole lot of violence. You said violence, right? Yeah. It depended on the prison you were at. There were some prisons that were a little calmer and some were a little wilder with the gangs. A lot of young kids coming in. But I've been sitting right here with this man sitting in a chair. I was watching TV beside him. I've seen him get hit in the head with a lock and fall forward. I've seen people get cut across the face. I've seen people stabbed. I've seen a man get cut across the back, got 160 staples in his back. Not stitches, staples. We were sticking bed sheets in him to keep him from bleeding to death. But, well, it's like the hot seat we were talking about on 7-step. There are days you go through, you're on constant alert, you're stressed out 24 hours a day. Because when you go to sleep, somebody's yelling. When you wake up, somebody else is yelling. You think it's the same one. Trying to figure out, this guy yelling all night. But you don't ever know, at any minute you could get into something. Just if you walk in and brush somebody and don't say, excuse me, that night you might get stabbed because that guy has got an attitude about it. He feels disrespected in some kind of way or whatever the issue is. But yeah, there's a lot of violence. Yes?
How did you figure out those dynamics? Were you mentored by some seasoned prisoners, or you just savvy and kind of knew how to navigate your way through it?
You are a little bit. Some people will guide you a little bit, but a lot of times you just have to figure it out your own. But like I was telling the 7-step last night, or St. Mary's, if you're 6'5", a lot of times they leave you alone. They'll find somebody shorter to. Yes.
Did you find was much racial tension in the prison in North Carolina?
There was some, a little bit, but not so much as the streets, I don't think. There was, you have people in any kind of society or group that are racially motivated in their thinking or whatever, or the way they were raised. So it's not really a whole group of race against another group. You might have 2 or 3 out of 70 in a block I was in that they just won't talk to white people, or they just won't talk to black people, or whatever their issues are. But that's their issue, you know. It's not really the prison system as a whole. But yeah, you see racism, but you see racism everywhere. Prison society is a society. It's a group. You're going to have that sort of thing. Yes?
What was your general perception of the correctional officers that you talked to?
Half are good and half are bad. My bad being that they just harass you for no reason. A lot of times they'll nitpick and do stuff just to aggravate you. What?
Any corruption?
There's plenty of corruption. I could get whatever I wanted in prison. I was telling Mark earlier that I worked in an optical plant, and as you all might know, if you wear glasses, they're $100, $200 a pair. I'd make them for the staff members and tell them, because I worked in the plant, hey, I'll get you these glasses, grab me a pizza or 2 when you come to work tomorrow. I've made glasses for the captains. So I know if I'm making glasses for the captains, I get caught making glasses in the plant, all I got to do is go to the captain, he's going to throw the infraction away. Hey, I got caught with these glasses, they were for Officer so-and-so. I don't worry about it. Yeah, there's plenty of corruption. You can get whatever you want. Cell phones are $300 for a little mini disposable, I forgot what they were called, kind of cheap phone you can buy at Walmart for $59 or $49. Cigarettes for $5 a pack on the street, and you can buy them from officers for $20.
Could you smoke in jail?
Man, they smoked more in jail than on the street, but they were illegal. There was this room right here would be full of smoke. The officer would be sitting right there. But it's not worth it to him. A lot of times you go, look, I'm not making enough money for me to go try to find that cigarette. I don't care what you're doing. They're paying me $30,000 a year. But then you had some that would try to find it. But a lot of times they just turn their heads. Wouldn't be worth it. Dealing with different people.
Derek,
You told me something today about staff reaching out to you since you got released.
Right.
What was that?
I had a good rapport with the staff members, or most of them. I've actually heard from about 5 different staff members since I've gotten released. One was an officer that he was in Afghanistan and he came there to work. Now he's a police officer in New York. Somehow he found me when I got released. Hey, I knew you were finally going to get out. And then another staff member, there was actually about 3 that still work there. They're in contact with me about once a week. There may be more, maybe 5, up to 5, I'd say. Just like I was telling Mark earlier, the people in this society, in the prison society, become your new family members. You know what I mean? It's like staff or inmates become your brothers or your sister, or your uncle. Just, it might be the uncle you hate. You know what I mean? But they become your new family. You know what I mean? It's like, because you have to rely on different people for different things. There was one officer, I remember when he started, actually, when he started working. When I got incarcerated, now they're all top people. I even knew the director of prisons. So I actually bought him a pair of golf shoes when he was officer one time. He wanted something really, I don't remember what the story was, but somehow they allowed us to buy tennis shoes back and forth, and he said something one day about, I'd like to have these Nike golf shoes. So I ordered them for him and he got them. But I remember that was the director of prisons. Yeah. Yes?
Is there anybody still there who, like, prisoners still there who's particularly on your mind, or like if you?
No, I really don't think about any of them.
Yeah.
I'm trying not to even think. There's some, like I was telling, I don't know if it was St. Mary's or, there's some people in prison need to be shot, actually. You know, I mean, they were talking about the death penalty and the 3 strikes law. And they pick and choose different people, like during the election year, the district attorneys are putting people on death row a month before the election, just so they get elected, or they're using this 3 strikes law, picking and choosing. You could have, this guy over here could have 20 strikes, but he's not getting the 3 strikes law, which enhances your sentence. Now, if he gets arrested a couple months before election day, yeah, he's going to get it because it looks good for him. But some of the people in prison, they're pretty bad off. They need to be there. Somebody asked me the other day if I believed in the death penalty. Yeah, because I know them people. I was in prison with them for 30 years. The people that are on death row probably don't need to be there, but some of the ones that I know, yeah, because they're not going to change. Psychologically, they're messed up. It would take years to change them. You don't have that much time. I know Ashley's got a question. Okay. All right.
I think actually Jane has many questions. This is how you're finding things with people and Mark's things been and what's been, I don't know, I guess on the flip side, what have you enjoyed the most since you?
I don't know. Sandy keeps me up a lot at night.
Yeah.
I take him out to dinner about once a week sometimes.
Yeah.
That's probably good, like the restaurants I was telling Morgan about. Because I missed out a lot of food. We had a 5-week, I think it was a 5-week menu. Every Tuesday you're eating hot dogs. You know what I mean? For 30 years. It's the same thing over and over and over and over. Spaghetti on Friday or whatever, fish on Friday lunch. I can still remember it.
So what's been your favorite meal then?
Everything. It doesn't even matter. I'll go in any. I like walking downtown Toronto. You got an Indian restaurant, a Greek restaurant, right beside each other. You get. The only thing I probably don't care much for is American food. I don't leave that.
Any other questions then?
What's the question back there?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, just the last question perhaps. How would you make the system fair? I mean, it went so wrong.
You can't really make the system fair. You can't really make the system fair because you're dealing with people that everybody has a different personality, different belief system.
Yeah, but the judge was partial. The judge should have recused himself.
He should be in prison.
There's nothing in
It's stacked against you because you go into prison or you get arrested. It might be a minor crime. They can make a big crime out of a minor crime fast, because if you commit one crime, you're going to get 5 different charges for just whatever. Resisting arrest you get. You're getting this, you're getting that. But I didn't resist. Well, you got to prove that. You've got an officer of the law saying you did this, or you've got an eyewitness to a crime saying, I saw him do this, even though the man did it with you. So it's stacked against you because they're going to throw you in this little room. It's not even that big. It's maybe from here to there. That big, with a toilet and a sink in it. And you're used to being free, and you're stuck in this room all day to think. And they keep telling you, you plead guilty, you're going to do a year. We'll get you out of this jail, we'll get you in a place where you got a gym and a yard you can walk on and everything. 8 months of that right there, you're going to plead guilty. You don't have a winner there. So to change that, you would have to change the plea bargain system. I think 85% of all cases are plea bargains. So I don't know a way to change it. Somebody smarter than me might, but I don't.
Did you ever think about making a complaint about the judge? And I bet you did think about it. Is there a process?
Yeah.
Was there a process to making a complaint?
This judge rewrote the whole sentencing guidelines. He knows everybody in town. It'd be like, you'd have better off putting one against that wall. You might win that against the wall, putting a complaint against the wall there.
No feasible process.
It's like any job you're in. If you're an attorney or a judge or whatever, you know everybody in that circle. You know the DAs because you're seeing them every day. You know everybody. So if I put a complaint against this judge, it's going to this other review committee where the man went to law school with the guy. He's going to tell you, I got this complaint against you today. What are you going to do with it? It's gone. I know how that system works. I've been in it. I've seen them beat people out of chairs and put them in segregation, hold their mail for a month until they heal up. I've seen them cover up everything. I've seen a man die from a heart attack in his room. Medical department comes in and puts a medication bottle on his table while he's dead. I saw them do that. And then when the people come to interview it, look at it, I don't know what's wrong. I don't know why he died. He probably wasn't taking his medication. And they look and it's a full bottle of medication. Oh yeah, he wasn't taking his medication. But I saw him put it in there. You know, they cover up a lot of stuff. It might not be they cover up everything, or everybody covers up something. But the stuff I've seen, you wouldn't have a chance of filing a complaint against that judge. Same thing with the grievance committee. Yeah, you're losing.
Well, I want to thank you most sincerely on behalf of the law school and our students who have come, and many members of the public who have joined us, Derek. Thank you for sharing your experiences. Thank you for being frank about the tough parts. I don't know what the good part was, but I know from what you said that you did form relationships even if you're trying to leave all that behind you. I know we all wish you good luck as you're trying to reintegrate into the community, and I know Derek has said that he's happy to stick around. Everybody can have some snacks, chat with him, chat together, and take away something positive from this, as I know all of my students who are here will, and I hope you do as well. So from all of us, good luck, Derek.
Thank you.